Gabe, when you see the app, can you rate it from 1 to 10 in the chat?
What did you say again?
I said, Gabe, when you see the app, can you rate it from 1 to 10 in the chat?
I think that's what I'm going to call the 1 and C.
Okay. Fair enough.
Austin, did you get my G chat? Can you put one of my coaches on the chain? I don't care who. I'm going to get my mouse.
Okay, I'm going to run to the bathroom, and as soon as I come back, we can go ahead and send out the 1 and C.
Sorry, Claire's computer just stopped. Give me 1 second. Second. Your volume all the way up there.
We're good, whatever.
Eleanor's in the bathroom right now, but she'll send it when she gets back.
I'm gonna give my headphone cable one more shot. It was not working this morning, so. And it remains not working.
Okay, is anybody not good to send out the 1 AC? Cool. Should be sent. Oh. Get out the sent. Get some sort of visual indication to people when they have it and are good to go. Okay, 2 judges. 3 judges. I think everyone but gay. Cool. All right. Advantage when it's crisis ability, extended nuclear deterrence is collapsing, causing crisis escalation for lack of credibility, screening commitment, tracks, variety, lack of interview, increased redundancy, nuclear conflict that candidate Trump refuses to raw first use. His agents undermine crisis ability, and with the interview, the user red needs only retaliation to attack the user, silence the user. First, not necessarily less incredible starts weak and other commitments use each other in war, the country, their past, destroy use cities. Third is understanding consequences, use especially sitting willingness to be reassuring, trying to knuckle well where the use of nuclear system starts to be interpreted as direct commitment, creating commitment, trying to use it. Legal to compel the fall through a nuclear response, you can believe unwise and trigger catch, undermines unavoidable response, appealing to respond, critical commitments, supposed to use first, not to by third piece of land today and future use can all rely on magic of nuclear bomb. Second, the nuclear bomb incentivizes crisis initiation and adversary testing. Perkovich 15 extended deterrence complete with nuclear deterrent, not the same potential use of striker potency. The mechanism we can resolve with new devices, but by potential aggressive, we see this with Ukraine and nuclear threats with the guarantee from French advice of weakening, but if there is also a question, moral has to be created project take with civilian nuclear avail amount, allowing a nuclear deterrence and domestic conventions historically NATO and Japan and conventional competed to and being able to change back to the ground if you have to take it back to your head and escalating conflicts is credible. Think of first use of violence and 99% of the population have never heard of meditation real assessment in terms of credibility, insurance, potential capability, totally sufficient. It culminates in nuclear war. Clarifying declaratory policy is key. Outright and miscalculated procedurability is miscalculated increased proportionally with complexity of nuclear declaratory policy posture derived from the nuclear limited war and because declaratory policy view miscalculation, population of the impenetrable confusing messages will exacerbate miscalculations fear of a first nuclear strike is pervasive in new purpose terms escalation tech advancement changing character war data masking psych opposite false environment. India models the plan levering house 18 rising powers conforming center upon recognition of basically called the Emily values and practice and seek recognition of responsible nuclear status the role. This is paramount norms for nuclear responsibility are influx from center variant conception nuclear strange declaratory nuclear doctrine play main suspects, how far to be judged responsible with the extent which turn to flex restraint independent strategy adopted by nuclear states in India first use posture caused the Indo-Pak war and both loose nukes both escalate. Clearing 19 perceived evolution risk getting shift. Source kind of first option unlikely to achieve lasting nuclear superiority. The net only have modest change of limiting factors in strategic nuclear force cause to be substantial factors in adjusted behavior and would have an incentive to go force and go past the counter force making parameters self-fulfilling prophecy. India had multiple difficulties to Pakistan forcing arms race. Pakistan physical superior action though contagious warhead supported by Pakistan's underground developments. Pakistan throwing underwater accelerate. And Pakistan shifted towards the areas risk of accident. Pakistan diverse airport weapons nuclear capable aircraft to the country facing significant terrorism host radical violent actors of women procedure carries serious risk of loss and definition flawed. One of the targets that Pakistan also diverse territory core vehicles. Pakistan greatly complicate tracking nuclear weapons putting pressure on India's intelligence available capability. Pakistan build up nuclear forces and altered development Pakistan India possibly maintain critical counterforce option and nuclear war cause extinction counterforce fail. Star 14 world leading climate intelligence public series study including made sense years probably 1% nuclear power in the US launch for nuclear arsenal even small nuclear catastrophic destruction global climate destruction of ozone nuclear weapons destroy the human race by global environment leave the earth on a habitable platform to produce no other tons of both encircle the earth creating ice age weather condition of carbon and EMP destroy to all modern electronic devices including nuclear power plant every reactor we instantly melt on the pellet we don't habitable nuclear primacy faulty methodology release such opportunity successful nuclear force causes like the one to produce nuclear feminine advantage to is Congress limited institutional knowledge is wording congressional oversight of nuclear issues works response to evolving nuclear security risks including nuclear airburst managing nuclear risks from NOCO running Russia Congressman take up greater leadership role the effective oversight of the issue being constrained by limited knowledge of first representing congressional attitude by erosion of engagement real data among staff and ability leader of security yet to lead Congress to do more there's unequal creative policy to counter emerging technologies out of manufacturing defense cyber age jeopardized by deterioration of governance there's need for Congress to play a role nuclear and security through civilization ending nuclear war only increasing congressional expertise solve fever 17 Congress pushing the executive strength of nuclear science and be right for another close look and reviewing procedures and problems we identify areas for improvement however topics highly classified and complex are for SRs to address even single news triggered acts of assurance by leads civilization vetting outcomes that have assurance never authorized you to put a safety minimize risk and a history of improvement process congressional advocates have forced disaster we never had truth the catastrophic acts manipulating the best take attack up to date and hardware software and comms rapidly evolving cyber threats addressed by cross examination CNC overdue for major expensive upgrades at the same time geostrategic environment markedly different threats become emerging reality CNC is facing new strains by performance enhancing ability to and priority legislative budget the actual officer exceeding complex recommend caution for legislating in particular fix nebulous Congress play an important role in targeting CNC to input through authorization and appropriation lack of congressional nuclear leadership is vital to nuclear power safety and stopping new nuclear material. Boston 19 nuclear security paid from the conversation with material vulnerable criminal terrorist organization to fight risk leadership of sales safety for interested in the issue used to vital role in reducing risk of nuclear terrorism gaps from nuclear power emerging heck with nuclear security implication pose new challenges budget declining Trump's limited interest and about leadership and congressional engagement and stagnancy each party put forward new ideas have a little knowledge expertise to spread without knowledge of Congress unwilling to enable expert power oversight of nuclear security and access to AGU is the vital internal link to enabling nuclear terror the most NTI 14 is typical challenge for terrorists seeking build nuclear weapons is obtaining AGU weapons could be fabricated with that state system primary fundamentally but the AGU is technically easier to secure AGUs the short decrease risk AGU using fuel which reaction many been shut down not decommissioned many do not have adequate security and single terrorist use is likely and even crude device killing a million people causes nuclear war and collapses the international order. Bun 17 nuclear and serious single terrorist bomb is usually make a critical explosive that concluded a possible group if they got the material and other event seizure material and terrorist after train bombs even a crew bomb coalescing and devastating fire some probably slowly killer radioactive volatile deadlier than the blast itself the explosion destroy ability to find how many would die in a working 500,000 people not counting radiation sickness they're going to attack my last shot military special cross and resulting conflict escalate to nuclear use politics of young more crucial by powerful state action by forcing preserve security more freely engagement by forcing terrorists worry about safe haven confidential and international institution might erode and independently use nuclear leadership solves nuclear war reinforces the taboo of the night. That was preventing use of spreading nuclear. If the danger will be greater, normal supported by the social exchange, but nuclear terrorism lower confidence. Nukes will not be used using pressure to lessen probability weakness. Danger of nuclear terrorism, but also strengthen confidence in taboo. If there's rise, the taboo can help both countries reduce submission, avoid misconduct, thereby reduce the nature of nuclear war. And the plan solves one secrecy produced by the need for rapid and opaque decision making under first use posture stripping. First use authority solves year 17. American nuclear chain of command grants absolute authority launch physiologic and very far the hero opposing the extra constitutional power. The president requires the congressman train not just the sitting president, the office is centralized power in the hands of the president. Do consequence of all purpose national security, secrecy holding in for Congress, the hardest nuclear monarchy there. Only branch checks on most powers. Nuclear procedures for any check from have to be institutional, not have to be removed. Congress must address the power nuclear monarchy must end. Specifically blocking nuclear oversight, limiting authority, restores expertise, formation, and informed decision making. Benedict 18 until the bill to prevent nuclear force use amended difficulty of the Congress act to executive power since only the expert community try to prevent enemies from learning about our plans, such as prevent representatives from the knowledge needed about nukes capabilities and classified war plans and about accidents, secrecy, and power to the executive representatives are the truck and the executive large power of the people have no choice to their nuclear monarchy without congressional deliberation. We reduce secrecy by requiring Congress to participate in parts of the expertise, ability to talk to colleagues about foreign policy, reduce Congress authority to legislation limited first use necessary for step move nuclear democracy. And second is political will. Restricting nuclear authority builds momentum to assert broader nuclear oversight. Scary 14. When Congress shifted overseeing atomic weapons of infantilized, deprived most weighty burden and lost its gravity, capacity deteriorated as its obligation book after book describing Congress to functional that it was Congress authority will travel back to the first path requiring such intelligence but middle ones had in reverse causal statutory participation forces Congress to educate itself. BIS 76 requires the Congress authority to advantage of two members of course become aware. I'm not an expert on nuclear strategy for too long for Congressman. I'm just based on nuclear strategy. No one seems to know nukes are very dangerous. Misunderstood understood and planned, the United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in policing and or sentencing by prohibiting first use of nuclear weapons, solvency, congressional first use prohibition with criminal penalties, self-restraint, judicial restrictions are non-credible. See for 10, most important to them, one illegal promise, no first use of criminal punishment violation, legal regime, clear procedure, actually prevent pro-live. There's no judiciary with autonomic jurisdiction or powerful executive to enforce the law, international law, may incorporate domestic laws or law enforcement authority to enforce the law within at least one state boundary, visible, helpful, not carry enough weight in global force, ensure states do not violate international law with impunity. Public debate about technical and policy stakes of nuclear weapons challenges the least maintenance of cultural ambivalence. Taylor a norms and nuclear weapons of legitimate necessary enable nuclear institution to provide the challenge posed by the end of the Cold War. Nonetheless, extraordinary levels of violence creates the moral and political price opposition to nuclear weapons rising the question of legitimacy, state power, nuclear policy, rhetoric, democracy, need to reinvigorate nuclear political sphere support which provided for remedies and power, public understanding of technical value and public issues where was debate and enable discussion that allows diverse interpretation, making it possible to recognize common goals where they exist and articulate areas and participants who are eager to discredit result in the operation for thought and action from nuclear fission instead of producing direct action or test to contend the future of nuclear weapons. The plan for aggressive demand for congressional NFU follows an empirically successful history of anti-nuclear movement, digging our head in the sand about nuclear risk is deeply unethical. Michelle 17. These feel disempowered the history of nukes since frequent intervention organized people for 50 years. One of the largest social movements will lead back from the brink of the Eisenhower during the Korean War in Taiwan. It can be an almost stop nuclear action. Popular protest Eisenhower box by popular protest race and came in very hawkish thanks of nuclear campaign adopted. This armament is of public policy. People don't want to think about nuclear war. The movements challenges maintain momentum and sense of danger. Develop mass pressure on Congress, mobilize sympathetic contingency currently proposed the president got issue nuclear war. That's a pretty big restriction and starting mobilization against militarism results in spill. It affects qualitative and quantitative data improves anti-war activists go to organized resistance. Whereas 12 people recruited activism organization they try to make a difference how long they were engaged in what type of activity they engage in. Remove the gateway into left activist and four passer. More like a spell over cultural movements expose people further opportunity to participate in 9% of anti-war protesters feel even though individual may be recruited through physical quality active embrace new causes anti-war protesters and allied movements. Mark the very last card at movement. I'm good for cross-X.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
We're not good for cross-X 10.
Okay. Cool. Thanks. Stop 7:30.
Cool. When I see, I should have the cool. Perfect. The plan, what does it do?
The plan, let me get this exactly right. It prohibits the first use of nuclear weapons.
Are those
So
currently, like, why is that criminal justice?
The Siebert evidence is actually really specific on this and says that there are proposals in Congress that have not been enacted to create criminal penalties for the first use of nuclear weapons. The Siebert evidence goes on to describe this would sort of constrain the executive. It would sort of increase congressional oversight of these procedures, et cetera.
How would it do that?
Yeah, the Siebert evidence says that one, it sends sort of the credible international signal, which is the same thing as sort of like the, you know, the way a declaratory NFU
what an
perception of
NFU
other
is.
actors.
Like, I also have stolen cards from a college topic. I'm more wondering like how the criminal justice NFU solves, like the solvency mechanism, not about the signaling mechanism.
Right. I'm saying the signaling mechanism is the solvency mechanism for Advantage 1 specifically, because the question of signaling to other actors that the U.S. is not going to use weapons first in a crisis. Secondly, for the Congress advantage, it's a question of Congress reinstating its authority, which is the internally solving matter. Oh.
There's also no other way to enforce an NFU. Like, I don't know how else you think it would be enforced, but we've read evidence that says it would be enforced via criminal penalties, which the would it, mandate.
Okay, cool. What crime would the criminal penalties be for?
The crime would be for first use of nuclear weapons.
Cool, that makes sense. Advantage 1, crisis stability. Actually, advantage 2, let's just talk about the framing contention because we both know we're going to the K. The Taylor evidence talks about why the legitimacy of state power is bad. The Meisel evidence also talks about anti-nuclear movements. You've read an advantage 2 about why the U.S. nuclear taboo, which like already is a racist word, like is necessary for global stability. I understand that in a vacuum, NFU movements might be good. But I don't know why the AFS NFU movement is one of these like anti-colonial NFUs.
Sure. So I would argue one, anti-colonial isn't a phrase that the Taylor evidence indicates is necessary in the context of NFU movements. Our last card says that anti-war movements broadly cause spillover into other movements, which would indicate that sort of the absolute first step.
Why should we trust?
Why should we trust you? Like, I don't understand this question.
Well, you said spillover is good. I'm wondering why we should trust anti-war activists.
Because I guess anti-war activism is empirically more successful. The second card on the framing contention indicates those anti-war movements are able to prevent people like Eisenhower, people like Nixon from attacking aggressively in areas across the globe. It empirically uses sort of Reagan, that was initially anti sort of disarmament policy, but then public pressure forced him to change his mind and institute actual nuclear agreements with places like Russia. Rojas cites studies that indicate that sort of anti-war activists go on to other more successful movements, right? Like, you don't have an ideological purity problem, you have a people problem, and we solved that.
That makes sense. We have 4 seconds. I just want to look. I want to see. Yeah, you can. Oh, you can send it. Wait. 7:30. It doesn't matter. We're gonna still take a little problem. Can you get?
Stop 6:53. I'm gonna send you first.
Two case. Advantage 1 advantage.
Wait, so I have a 1 and C with 3. So we should.
Yeah, we're not. We took out the really bad
Okay.
procedural.
1 second. I have to like reopen the
I can just send it, Cliff. That's easy. Cool. Austin, you know we almost cut this F.
Late to the party. I do like the mustache, though. I forgot to tell you.
We also were going to read it against K teams. So.
Okay, updated 1 and C is sent.
Is it just taking out the procedural? Because if so, I can just
I think
like.
they're new cards.
There's new stuff too.
Yeah, I think it's just the procedure. I would probably open the doc, but it's probably just the procedural side. Yeah.
I'm gonna move this first. Does everyone have the doc? If no one verbally objects, I'm going to assume I'm good to start whenever. Criminal justice refers to the police, courts, and correctional institutions assisting from criminal law. Bernardi, criminal is a study of police courts assisting from criminal law, but the behaviors of the repeated punishment letter law sentencing occurs after the determination of liability callings. 18, the U.S. Supreme Court is sentencing for trial, subject to conviction, after the defendant submitted the position of sentence, black for trial, for determination of claims of defense, is said to be served and formally presented for finding the defendant guilty. Policing is the step that brings people into the justice system. It's done by police and proceeds prosecution. Eyes in it. Study your 18, policing is the police making the first determination for the simply well intensive police prosecution violation. Topical action must change policing and sentencing procedure that affects policing or sentencing. They do not reform policing or sentencing themselves occurred a non-existent criminal penalty. Voting F1 limits there are thousands of laws in the book, which is impossible to research or make an entire call subject to justify, but those laws because the literature base is so deep it creates impossible research ground. Changing criminal law gives the access to someone to mechanism to access all advantages to legalization. There are dozens of them. It makes it impossible for Nike to catch up. New after a voting issue proves they didn't want to engage in the negative index preparation. 30 minutes pre-round solves their offense. K first off is abolition. Second off is abolition. K changing the scope of the CGS model of social reproduction that changes who is able to govern but operates through privatization and risk management of whole communities. Changing laws is clinging to the power of an unstable social order. Harney 7 to the private sphere to the public sphere to the privatization of the capacity leaving the and wholesale criminal element sociology of the power of the state president the only criminal element is purple city criminal state purpose criminal law set of the deviated from the state law criminal state of the party of the world state society seeks a criminal pattern and social criminal sociology criminal and six of the private state forms of criminal the state moment comes when the capital is living in the social interpreting the body of higher social injuries the stage but they live to preserve the reason the ready to go off the population made this road was when he interpreted the capacity so many who's deemed unmanageable to bring the government to the population that the reason we government the difference the government stands for population ability but so interested in the accumulation government is where we're sort of the best political capacity to apply to ability of certain in order to derive to criminal is a criminal that a government must have a state form whatever deadly form of the antisocial character the state form of the become associable with leaving the enemy that say that they come as to constitutional makes but to believe the criminal heritage and state how is itself the best shielding the state is thinking to the best study the shelter to the real which of access to yellow recreation of the target and criminals and criminals have done how to seek out the law is driven the minister against society and dismissal of the lot of holding legalities criminals associated with the spaces of the possibility of criminality he cannot better one profit to see all the faith there's no investment in criminality the future of the freedom of contemporary state from the institution populous and allowed for those individual that ability to like the capital governance and basic career from the distribution of policy the patterns of the invincible criminal everything so solely word to say a lot of necessary the university can also put in the system to benefit of the public the government must allow for those that be able to already risk discourse enables a metaphysical will to stability that ushers in cybernetic social control that paradoxically requires instability to continue weighing 18 uncertainty sanitation purpose to how inhabit the world of the outside record of the over to the law or the height of the graphical relative of the potential for the manipulation of companies that the most superior the terrorism and hold the catastrophic opposite of it including a color for security and solution purpose of a certain the overcome the analytical limitation the metaphysical problem of creating order the instability the metaphysical problem the name is cybernetic guide to effectively expands surveillance of policing authorization on the power with the romantic companies but how the business rejecting fiat illusions in the CGS their decision to authorize tweaks totally disconnect from the everyday realities of the CGS and black and brown populations is unsustainable. A CAF Eskimo mission that it costs educational investments in incarceration reject the Alphon 4 Murphy of 14. The problem is that when the criminals are made a bank of the system, criminals are raising the leaves and students and the students will be loving the rest of your days. It's really spent on the road. Cannot quite understand, but it is a part of our criminal auditions give the person that because they want to participate in religious part of the others will leave them in the world of civil criminal laws, but the beautiful little serious and middle and criminal things. But it calls for the radical thing to spend a lot of time with this book of the very for the future trip. They say take with the cafes a depiction of the Harry and the machine is working out and the visit habit of open the recommended surveys and last repeal to leave in discussing influence of your the habit and influence and research and the light see the children playing with keep it always by redoing the distributionary. The one he sees a political consult of democratic despotism. There's pathological demand for access to greater demand to resilience to maroons communities and demons. Mountain and Hardy 15. The demonstrated proof that the council policy of nationalism and policy percentages will look at the most back of the election people want to work in those fields of defensive business low in the problem the policy will put back wrong again about a little authority able to then give me consultant institutional institutional activity access to police already when it was stopping when you try moving in the demonstrated balance like ability to get holds already with the hardest will to have to institute a religious hold over to the cops and not holding us NFU is emblematic of anti-nuclear small policy to hide the imperialist underpinnings of the military by painting happy face on nuclear weapons as only fuels nuclearism perish and bond government and 9 the anti-nuclear person before military highly realized and overly used power in the territorial given specific start with the and U.S. nuclear military dominance over the German Charlie the student not look at the fact about because the fact that the living believes that the United States nuclear was that is the slowly starving the difference in nuclear still is position of the nuclear problems is entirely what makes the rest of the second new nuclear is preventing the shift going nuclear further. Yeah, FX is a hostage by tying us to the status quo and making any carceral revolution impossible in the face of crackdown too high. Their ethical framework makes slaves or golden prisons impossible. You should instead from the unconditional value of criminalization and stare death in its face, weighing 18 of the crux of the blue skies above the during dreading the literary way to be mistaken for the non-directions but fall in the radiance of it is the person would be punished to get angle to this part of their life to simply wake up in the sky the rest of the person feeling afraid of the person to be all so that it makes real and spiritual level no problem the disagreeing to their spiritual independent but never control an individual process the possible events of everything going to be killed we believe address mentality with the future will dire revolutionary so that this movie the way we imagine the future is locked out of the counter souls of our level of a imagination the powers never held to the biggest desire of a principle has to be for structures levels of vibrations and satisfy the arrogant her for no amount of thinking could diminish the height of the dream that comes to constitute reality. The alternative is an imaginative poetic of abolition against genocidal politics and the present regime that creates a constituted exclusion of its condition of possibility, saying and Fruderman and Wang 18 or the poetics and to the present of abolition imagination organization the science fiction gives alternative futures of black and black and after fusion the movies are about the vision of the exist the fact that the imagination the work of the present of the world of everything else what feature of the I can do the trouble of social realism and district the ways of our system that can catch people if there was a research of the need to repair prison guys to be settled for the possibility of the world of president and the president of an innocent and deeply society good because it is hard about the lotus serving the American tribulation money for reporting about it of violent non-religious security the politician of the violent offenders reforms and background of the criminalization police and our catastrophe and love you okay there cause mass incarceration US departments we can say has to do with the population so we know somebody policy vis-a-vis freedom the deterioration of psychological dimension of racism first advantage this makes no sense they would have to take the nuclear button away from Biden which is not topical just criminal prohibitions won't do anything no miscalculate doesn't see ocean targeting deterrence and no escalation pain 17 years of accidental political arguments service to relate other powers for themselves whoever the side of the door should return to their self means for scales of authority to come to panic accountable for circulations system of place well the water really rigorous and redundant technical procedure the same kind of accidental nuclear launch South Asia stable empirics prove no crisis will escalate Haggerty 20 with the diverse of the stability based on the evidence of empirical organization deterrence of the five and everybody's energy reckoned with the cost of the operation fixing the limited part of the charge of the bureau such a piece of dealing never afraid in them embedded out of the military response the year taken carefully calibrated that during the 19th of 2019 both the reconciled for the FY escalation that refer to the airstrike of the Pakistan room to identify the nuclear signal the second advantage the language of taboo and their evidence is race it comes from a Hawaiian word that means a sacred place providing the violence of their presentation the no nuclear Mueller 20 terrorist mistakes of it limited is really even less represented going attack block of action maybe drugs of it expert if possible recent knowledge of alarmers to discover the tremendous effort is scarce to be like the 6-8 restraint on the first use of nuclear weapons is key to U.S. hegemony reinforce the norm of conventional warfare tyranny 60 units with the rifles of powers of the world countries issue no first use of a ground conventional legislation there's a account of whether nuclear uphold those metal that already have the nuclear power because of the world that has very right now these blood to have the reinforce its treaty advantage but discord the nuclear to keep the war a safely winnable chance with have the definition of conventional war for the present nuclear arms to defend the strategy of the Indian national levy the first strike at India 7 like for all Pakistan conventional blood against nuclear to defend interest yeah. The AF's modeling and diplomacy arguments depend on the myth of American exceptionalism. The inherently limits any radical protection of potential of an NFU both for 12 Obama purposes and Washington the abolition of nuclear weapons and the life reflect the ideals where American especially given the United States of purpose of the myth of unity the nation for the gauges of purposes. The states is not radical. It is like the declaration of the abolition of the force policy. The person coming up political force even to expand the aspirations to serve the limits and exception limits the first of American violation of the policy filter the politics of the process. Right there.
Process.
Yep.
I'm sending a March version of that card right now.
Well, do you mind if we wait until we start cross-ex until I get it?
Not at all.
Yeah, we can wait.
Yeah. For sure. Oh. Send. Should have it. Oh.
Still have not gotten it, sorry. Okay, we're good. You good? Yep. Cool. This Bootfoy 12 evidence at the bottom, sort of the abolition of nuclear weapons is the same idealist aspect of American exceptionalism. You also read a card saying that nuclear first use is sort of key to American hegemony. I guess I'm confused what you think the lack of American hegemony in the international sphere looks like, and if the K is an attempt to solve that.
There was not like an impact turn to hedge. Like that is
Right. No, I'm saying you read a link to hedge, which I'm assuming you're not just going to give us for free. So I'm confused about what the critique's sort of perspective on American hegemony is. Does it say it's good? Do you say you solve for any aspect of it or no?
We don't think it's good.
Yeah.
No.
You don't think it's good? What does the K do to solve American hegemony broadly or American exceptionalism?
Well, we think hedge is bad, so I don't know why we would solve it. Like
Right, but what do you do to prevent American exceptionalism and prevent American hegemony?
Yeah, this is what Moten calls the pathological demand for policy. The idea that everything that has to be.
Maybe you don't have a policy. Maybe you have like a really thinking about something to dismantle hegemony.
You've read like 4 framing cards in the 1AC about why anti-nuclear movements have created like a lot of important demonstrations and really changed the nuclear policy of America. This is an argument that is much closer to the critique given the discursive framing of the 1AC. The alternative does agree that American exceptionalism and nuclear superiority is probably bad, but the affirmative frame.
Cool. So this is a representational question. You don't have, this is a like question of the
Links to the plan.
which, okay, you know what, we'll definitely get there. Sorry, I just want to move on to the K proper. It can't result in the F, right?
Doesn't fee out the plan. Does not fee out the plan.
Does not feel the plan. Fantastic. Does it make specific policy changes is what Austin asked.
No, like we don't fee out a policy.
The Wang 18 evidence, it's about effective investments in security cause surveillance and policing. I'm confused what about the AFs, like debating about the AF causes us to want more surveillance.
well, we've read a piece of evidence that says the affect that's invested in the kind of discourse of the app creates people who are
Right, but I'm asking about the specifics of that internal link chain. Like what about reading this affirmative makes us more likely to want to surveil others?
Well, when we talk about policing, I think it's more of a question of how we talk about policing, which is like when we talk about policing positively and we talk about how we can enforce, we're literally reading an app about.
Okay, so it's like an increased criminalization link. Cool. Does the AF fiat an end to prisons? Does the AF result in an end to prisons? Or the alt, yeah.
No, I mean.
The alt doesn't fee out anything, but we do think we should imagine the world differently. We do.
Okay, imagine the world differently. What does differently look like? Does that world have no prisons?
No, people shouldn't.
Okay. Prisons, cool. One last question. Does stare death in the face Wang 18 evidence? I'm confused as to what that looks like.
Okay.
It looks like the poetry of prison rioters who instead of saying, oh, it is more likely that our riot fails than succeeds, we should not do it. They didn't make a consequential
So it's a non-consequentialism claim. Okay.
Okay, 10 minutes starting now. 7:20, I'm saving now. Didn't save. Gotta reset it. That's annoying. Okay, should be sent. Is everyone good for an order? I will take that as a yes. It is case in the order of the 1AC, which would be crisis stability advantage, and the Congress advantage, TK. Is everyone good?
Give me 1 sec.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Sweet. Everyone good now? Okay. Uncertain nuclear posture causes inevitable crisis, escalation, and new conflict. Only credible enough use solves two internal links. One, it causes commitment traps and attempts at deterrence via threats at first use, puts pressure on the U.S. South to maintain credit. Two, unconditional nuclear umbrella cause always never so test red lines to test to see how far it extends. How forces are U.S. strong? One is see one is see Seabirds. That's the only way to enforce an NFU is criminal penalties. The plan functionally takes away the nuclear button from Biden, which they have no evidence on, and we have evidence saying that's a credible enforcement mechanism. One and C2, yes, miscalculation used for long term is mathematically inevitable at P&D. 16 without a foundation, rational decision making, and correct identity likely, even if the other does not watch it, will send me the 1.5 risk of investment arrested references when these NSA can so the probability is low over years of purchase 100% and probably increase in last time 2 3 already too many nervous in the sickness how the rule not the exception. We shouldn't be here operators and firmly offer to watch them as cyber attacks. And one and C3 South Asia is not stable. Arvin says a rising tensions, usually pressures, and close proximity, which decreases 5 times. All mean the conflict is inevitable, absent about the plan. The plan solves it by having an Indian model U.S. and a few Congress advantage. The plan prompts structural expertise over nuclear strategy, solves nuclear security, key to proper forms of command and control, which massively decreases the risk of any conflict ever. And once it's one of the taboo, so there's no reason why taboo is racist. HHS an assertion with no actual evidence for it. When it's two, yes, nuclear evidence says that's absent security over arsenals. It's inevitable and executive control. It fundamentally decks overall security because it can't because it doesn't actually the funds does all for it. And the last two cards, the plan solves the terminal impact. And nuclear supremacy enables U.S. military interventions, imperialism, and conventional aggression. The plan solves blogs. 17 of our citadel military affairs, so we never said this was special Germany and domination. The will made for securing long term. Just dominate markets, almost a weapon of mass destruction. With the military treasury, American politics and military leader of organizations that have interests of my imperial set of run international reach of president, mass murder, national policy, nuclear remain. Just by luxury of other nations, the USA is modernized and nuclear is making affirm a military company involving China's cyclical energy, but passing toward holding going on our friends through conversations, nuclear ideology, embracing determined balance against the populations, given racial velocity, decision to use of almost like him a little bit of never but less the same will be true, but also by the US, in Korea, and China, Iraq, high level technology, rate of battle developments, and team we putting back and placing the commander in chief is one of the most well-known congressional enforcement capabilities for criminal justice. Around us all, 20 promotions around the session to fund limit and varying fast criminal create liability for violation of powers of criminalization regarding the armed forces or Congress' strongest will, so within the security apparatus and counter criminal justice refers to criminal laws entitled 18 to the US Code, just 18 criminal justice at the federal levels, government criminal laws unattended the escalating and counter criminal justice includes laws governing crimes. LI 12 on the criminal justice first laws and procedures and policies during after a crime. And sentencing is a form of punishment. The plan changes to what penalties can be imposed for sanctions. For and a few oops, no crime and sentencing is for punishment and conviction and a prosecution sentencing authorities and then to be posed at private range between penalties and policing includes law enforcement and services related border maintenance of Falcone and Walls 95 and public posting for a wide range of government activities and maintaining public order includes law enforcement dealing with enforcement such approaches and prefer one legal precision. LI is a legal information database subsumes all their standards. Through research is inevitable. Every act can be explained to change the process, which means only distinction is so that we arbitrarily limit on top of last three intent to define scholarly sources to define the words in the resolution rather than chains of definitions that don't refer to each other are the most predictable and don't entertain potential abuse and functional limits and not check reasonability outweighs and extinction outweighs death is the only truly fixed ontological state and terminalized the possibility of future existence. One endpoint is when any form of violence comes first and you ought to vote out because extinction is a terminal form of it. Any chance that people derive from that living is reason to not to gamble. Two agency alternative metrics value self-determination and true by thousands of lawyers against some policymakers legal masonry. Three suffering new strength painful and endlessly and vulnerable population via starvation disease framework the implementation of the plan against the implementation of a competitive alternative to vital educational engagement. Any other arbitrary infer makes the possibility yaff and artificially narrows maintain for framework only that compare for other things that makes any education produced by the right meaningless and debate doesn't shape subjectivity. This is another base also around it happen at once a class and social backgrounds that way influences and decision as a technical frame trying hard to screw the armaments later and other framework placed in the hands of the military industrial complex elites have monopolies the terms of nuclear debates that shutting down public condensation that creates tacit consent for violent operation of state power costs the endless extension of Cold War hegemonic politics in the future the atmospheric challenge to resume legitimacy and necessity of satisfying nuclear policy challenges the legitimacy of state power and bolsters a public understanding of the issues which open space for direct action against the nuclear armaments that's Hayward and that means that they uphold nuclear colonialism address 9 theme of nuclear training public debate during joint events, point of second name, and then a second name, and working culture with their point of the solution of American Indians, the sources of production, and for the whole answer, and a civilian debate over nuclear strategies, key to undermine Cold War security logics, key to nuclear stability in terms of Hay Nichols, 14 wants to have evidence studying nuclear action, wrote in his area amongst the thinkers and nuclear strategists, experts are logic on analysis, several sources of the problems of our age, and America has resulted in nuclear war, subsequent and dominate national security policy doctrines like the use not anything, especially the intention of force and international security, and the absolute and subjectivity often through hostile robust studies that find that anti-war activism has unique spillover effects to other forms of social activism, including to anti-carceral movements, which proves the reading of the 118 creates social momentum towards addressing any subjectivity offense and solves the and can't solve any of the F1 policy is key. That was case 2. If it breaks down the principles, it can't solve the F. The F is an impact term because the reason why opposing companies is good and sticking our heads in the sand over nuclear policy does nothing. Next solvency and next solvency. Measles says that public discord and pressure on Congress over specific policy solutions to nuclear insecurity and how it can solve anything. Says mobilizing behind targeted appeals to change nuclear policy vastly underestimates the of nuclear conflict and the link to the Harney and Perny both and then Perny both. Doing the link of the Harney and Perny both solves it to change the structure of the laws is the link. The all has a few material changes to existing policy to solve it, and the Perny includes that the weighing of theories for doctrine no structural systemic failure produces best season 19 and 7 with social trackers leading all groups are undefined technologies of level and determined media groups influence design words and the obvious of being for determinism is problematic mean of producing such arrangements into one house that of force progress and has the economic cultural motivations of which normative facets of it is also over say analogy this is other social forces all struggles have no attack about also cultural about mention something all struggles technology the important means in the best really necessary social party best and essentially about like the Murphy F1 Fiat's inevitable every time we think about what we should do in a given situation we're fiating it 2 Fiat's good it's key to plan political strategies and ensure effectiveness solvency going to be actualized if you know what to fight for in the first place 3 and US of class solvency gives a linear risk linear trolley to our impacts advocating the F combined with the iterative process of years with debates makes it more likely that the plan actually happens plus all of our frameworks that's the reason why we're reading the AFA and usage of Fiat's good the Moon and Hardy have no the F doesn't solve democracy it creates checks and increase security on nuclear systems so which solves conflict but the card I read on the second advantage also means they solve the terminal impact on Graham like the aspect demand and focus on US nuke solves their impact on Graham 9 and the nuclear posture of the now the arms of the US responsibility rates under us as a president paired motivationary just campaign connects to new science that the nuclear budget now says that change our possible that cities are demand and the second way card doesn't assume the AF doesn't make doesn't make anti-carceral revolution impossible it's only imposes criminal penalties on the executive and no turns case for all solvency recalls explanation of international politics that don't exist. Effective investments in security don't explain all war blanker. 14 the heat charge arm and essential reification dangerous of holding one suggestion position when critical you can have all part processes in the hospitals and post tire of the foreign certification of all thinking methodological policy the heart of it simple critique model methods and so better from us or else between other methods doesn't matter kind of you should recognize every details or percent of the cannot win the main combining what methods must submit other needing compatible from voting instruction to social science reification and maybe start at the source. Older, what do you think about reading that one? Let's see, we have a bunch. can't find it right now. Yeah, it's fine. I'm good, whatever.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
Cool. I want to talk about the Rudisill evidence. I have the article open right now. The 2 paragraphs above the paragraphs you cut are about why the NFCA cannot constrain executive like nuclear use in a bunch of different scenarios.
Well,
And then
the
at the
app
bottom,
doesn't.
like,
Well, the app isn't the NFCA. The app imposes new criminal penalties on the president. That's the Sievert evidence. They don't exist currently, which means if the NFCA doesn't solve it, it just proves a uniqueness claim for the app and why app solvency, why the app is key.
okay, I want to talk about the Justia evidence, like what apps fit under it.
Any apps that are found under Title 18 of the U.S. Criminal Code will be topical.
Does that
Which also means that we can only affect currently existing legal procedure, and means that you cannot create new criminal procedures and stuff like that. It means because it can only affect laws that are currently in Title 18 of the U.S. Code. It sets so it's like task off on immigration. It sets a literal list of apps that you possibly have. Anything else is not topical.
So okay. Does that include immigration? Because the bottom is about deportation.
If there are criminal laws in Title 18 of the U.S. Code, then yes. Any laws that are in Title 18 of the U.S. Code with criminal penalties on them are topical under Justia.
I don't think confused what other way you think you're going to limit out immigration, but
Yeah,
Okay.
like Westy's app is about immigration and would meet your interp. So
Let's talk about the policing interp at the bottom, the kind of like Falcon and Webb evidence, like Wells evidence, which indicates policing refers to a wide range of government activities that maintain order. Would that include apps such as like, I don't know, like stopping like trash or like people?
well, there aren't criminal. I think you should remember criminal, which means that those would have only civil penalties, not criminal penalties. All of those apps would not be allowed.
Like you said, the policing refers to a wide range of like government activities to maintain public order.
Criminal justice reform is before
So
policing. It
what's-
modifies forensics science, policing, and sentencing because they have to all be in the area of criminal justice reform.
What stops teams from referencing current criminal code and then creating a bunch of arbitrary apps that do little things to maintain order?
Well, actually, I think this is kind of the reason why our interp is pretty sweet and a lot better than yours. Ours forces way bigger apps. You cannot have small changes like decriminalization because they're easily solved by ESR in courts. It forces huge sweeping changes to jurisprudence to beat the ESR counterclaim. The reason why corporate crimes beat ESR in courts is because it dismantled the entire administrative state. Like it forces humongous apps, which gives the neg tons of ground.
You haven't answered my question about why your app would limit out things that create arbitrary policing like interpretations. It's
What do we
anything
think?
that maintains
What do
order.
we think? I'm really confused why you think
How
ours is arbitrary. I'm not sure why ours would allow for arbitrary policing definitions, but it says that policing refers to a lot of government activities maintained that are maintaining the public order, which includes law enforcement. The app is enforced via law enforcement. That means.
7.
Wait, give me 6:53.
Oh, I have it at 7:20. All right.
No, that's okay. 6:53.
6:53 starting now. 240. Two cards. Gabe's gonna send them in a body. We stopped. At
Or not in a
240.
body.
In a dock.
Yes.
Okay, in a dock.
Can you read just the like so
One thing I need is a little bit of water. Caddo, have you gotten the document? Cool. Mike, Ani, and Tim, you good? I haven't given an order yet. The order is critique. 45-second overview, straight down. Advantage 1, advantage 2. Yeah, 8 minutes, starting mouse now. The current carceral regime is premised on the containerization of fugitive bodies and populations that are unreformable within the civilizational imagination. Carceral capitalism relies on the constant production of abject populations from Gaza to Ferguson and beyond. The 1AC's and the reservation to expropriate labor and life itself from genocided populations. This genocide is itself criminal, so the state is stuck in an unsustainable loop of self-criminalization, a snake eating its own tail in response to this governance, which is the drive to control excess sociality, engages in iterative tweaks such as the act to continue its stranglehold on the future. This is inherently tied to criminality. Harney and Wang indicate the person is the bedrock and the antithetical object that liberal futurity defines itself against. Constant reformism is in the body politic of unfreedom and calculates repetitive cycles of genocide with an external impact. Like they answered the security game, the 2AC, but they did not read a card to answer abolition, which means our entire theory of the world has been conceded. There's a crucial claim about intimacy, which will frame your ballot. Politics is not out there in position of the state, but the everyday relationships and scholarly projects that we cultivate between each other. The 1AC is what Harney terms the privatization of social reproduction. Criminality for the defense of humanity. This results in policy universal prescriptions about how we ought to operate between each other, which robs the generative capacity to dwell in incompleteness and insecurity, which proves you should prefer the proximate solvency of the alternative. Extinction outweighs is not offense. We have straight turned into the cyclical collapse of the state means their politics is unsustainable, requires widespread genocide to aggregate power. Harney indicates this results in ecological human genocide and our link straight turn the case, which will be explained below. Second is scholarship proceeds as your ballot can't solve state violence, but it can respond to carceral violence. In this space, our impact should be preferred because only we access proximate solvency. And winning framework changes this. Third is civilizational framing is bad. Wing indicates it requires genocide against populations outside of human civilization that are criminalized. This fruit, they're all lives matter framework, both the racist ongoing balance is insufficient to resolve violence. Fourth is we impact turn consequentialism, and they did not answer. Wang indicates the drive to preserve the current order makes it impossible for a person to revolt because the risk of consequences makes it too high. It operates as liberal pacification. Carcerality can only be abolished through a material and spiritual revolution that only can exist when we do not view death as an ending, but rather the beginning of something new. Believing in immortality creates revolutionary death that is the precondition for liberation. It outweighs the affirmative because the current system makes the imagination and value to life impossible, which is the precondition for biological life. Endpoints. Our endpoint is a world beyond carcerality and beyond their liberal consumption of death. So we have linked to this argument. Agency, the Wang argument explained above, answers this. The current status quo is massive suffering. They've also conceded it's unsustainable. So this doesn't matter framework. They have to need to defend their process of imagining the world and the world they create. This means they need to win their scholarship and impacts of fiat in this space are desirable prior to fiated action. The affirmative also is a project that imagines civilizational change and divorcing it from the iterative work that makes it reality renders it unrealizable because we want to have the tools to push for it to actualize. Our framework link turn solvency before we win offense regardless. There's four justifications. Fourth is the first the intimacy DA. This was the rant and the overview believing debate operates to only resolve external violence is the reparative move of the state, which results in unending demands for sovereignty. The criminalization of talking about affect in this space destroys the conversations necessary to resolve intercommunal violence. That is Harney. Second is the world of illusions DA. The form K below will to impact her in their curricular model, but Murphy indicates the quote a model penal code that doesn't exist but we use as an illusion to make the classroom function is a perfect description of their fiated model. This creates a cruelly optimistic investment in a fair CJS that could could never come and demobilize this radical struggle, even if the plan is good. Imagining it as criminal justice reform is bad. Third is the policy DA. The 1AC acts as the consultant whose unilateral demand on the government secures access for humanity. This mode of speculation institutes governance as inevitable and creates a manifest destiny of constant progress and genocide against those populations which won't conform, which is a psychological DA to the matter. Vote negative to plan for the 1AC outside of top-down implementation as a community which solves their impacts but not unilaterally impose it as a policy. They only have to be fiat policy, which we never do. They read 4 cards in the 1AC that movements are good, so we can agree that that is good and impacts on their solvency and have links to their representations. Fourth is winning impact frame from the overview, neutralizes the benefits of their model. Your role is to judge that unconditionally reject the caging and genocide of entire populations. They are not ethically justified. Education, all of the arguments above about how carcerality operates within this space, when turn the education they create, our interpretation is fair. They still get to weigh the scholarship of the 1AC, and it's a criminal justice reform topic. So they should be prepared for the fucking abolition case. Yes, debate impact subjectivity. We filter information to form our subjectivity in an iterative process. Even if fairness is an impact of the game produces genocidal subjects, we should be willing to give up on it. Yes, we agree that we should talk about nukes. This was the policy we planning distinction I did above this. The alternative also talks about nukes. So this is an offense. The nuclear criminalization stuff I answered above. The civilian debate card. This card is citing Michael Creepon, who's literally calling for first strikes on China right now. A truth that the subjects they create are not anti-war. Even if the form of the 1AC is anti-war, the content of the 1AC is anti-war, the form of its revolutionary planning is not. This anti-war activists are bad activists, which is going to be the Rodriguez cards I read in a little bit. The alternative, I will do it here. It's the imaginative poetic of abolition. The affirmative operates in carceral realism, where we can only imagine a world that continues the status quo. The alternative imagines a world without caging and anti-black genocide. This is informed by the traditions of black communism and Afrofuturism. This imagination creates a rupture in carceral realism that lets us imagine and plan for a world otherwise proven by how indigenous spirituality was a precondition to winning the battle of Little Bighorn to Haitian revolutionaries gathering before the revolt to plan beforehand. This changes how you validate competition. You should validate if the absent imagination of a world where their impacts and errors is true is commensurable with a world still likes Christians in the nation state form. After that, the alternative is still to the present, which renders its imagination insufficient. The belief that the executive inevitably exists and that we inevitably need to criminalize it is the affective investment in reformism that makes it impossible to imagine a world otherwise, which turns the alternative solvency deficit. The permutation, I made the competition argument above. I'll explain the links here versus the Harney link. Harney, this is a historical analysis of the way presidents have related to the military. It's like the question indicates that the president is so criminal they always need to criminalize themselves. While it may seem radical in form, it is colonialist in practice. As the state criminalizes its excess sociality, it recoups its own legitimacy and demobilizes the abolitionist activism. This unsustainable action of the state creates the conditions for what Harney terms mass intellectuality, but that only works if we don't invest our energies in recouping the state. Which, and when abolitionists in Haiti noticed that the colonial governor was losing power, they didn't ask nicely for him to disarm himself, but they fought back and they fucking won. Second is anti-nuclear nuclearism, the opposition to the U.S. as the father of the world that needs to be lead by example. When turning all of their arguments about being anti-nuclear, they're instead the reappropriation of American dominance. Third is terror reps. They're racist and violent. This is an external criminalization impact. Their belief that we always need to be safe against the terrorists is what results in violence abroad, which in terms of representation they create. They're also not anti-war because they increase more funding for nuclear security, which they said in the 1AC. The Susan evidence is about technology, not about abolition. You should have answered the critique. The next three arguments don't matter because about fiat, we have linked their internal linear internal link to solvency above. The next argument, how focusing on the U.S. solves the impact. No, they do not focus on the U.S. They focus on South Asian nuclear stability. And secondly, this card is about why we should downsize nukes. Remember, the app does not downsize nukes. It increases funding for nuclear security. This thing says we should defund the nukes, which they're totally distinct. The Liker card of methodological pluralism is bad with anti-war activists. Rodriguez and 10 war. The U.S. Home States president co-creating comparison of war, disclosing its localities, violence, states only. When the U.S. Homeland spectacles of Guantanamo, Hulu, about wars on games and drugs, out crusade, violence and illustrated in actual civil wars, racial purposes of the state, has recouped saying interests of dominance, political enhancement, financially racist, worsening, proliferation of anti-war liberal discourses challenging the militarized U.S. global regime have been insidiously recited to the geographic exteriors of the U.S. The loyal opposition of the U.S. left to a state-induced global wars entry conducted by the circuit reproduced a particular consensus of what war is. The consensus is about the continuity between state form technology, war making, geography, reform the U.S. home as a place of relative peace, war and state produces and state departure, institutional relations of massive racial violence are unrecognizable. As thus, advantage one, no commitment traps. This doesn't make any sense. We still have our alliances post-plan. We still are having an alliance with Japan. Congress is full of war hawks. There was just a fascist caucus that was founded by Marjorie Taylor Greene like 5 days ago. So we'd still get involved with the world. Congress would just press the button instead of Trump, which is our whole argument about how the government is unstable and invested in war making. The next card doesn't matter. They also dropped the Tunney evidence. It is game over. It says that if India does a conventional NFU, what will happen is that India will conventionally escalate against Pakistan, which will cause a war with Pakistan. That will go nuclear. It is dropped. The rising tensions evidence is wrong. Evidence indicates Modi doesn't think he could win a war in the status quo, and the economic incentives are too high. It is not structurally inevitable because hotlines check and see states do not escalate. India models the U.S. We impact turn this on the other critique. No one trusts the U.S. because we're talking about advantage two. The first card, the Mueller evidence indicates no nuclear terror. No terrorists have incentive to do it. They do not think they would win, and they think they would crack down on the last 20 years. There's no incentive, and they can't point to a terrorist. Nuclear superiority bad. They link to this card. You still have nuclear superiority post plan. You still have nukes. You still don't demilitarize. Their card just says we should demilitarize nukes. They don't do that. They increase nuclear security. This card is a link turn to advantage two and turns the entirety of the case because they just create an NFU. They don't change nuclear superiority. 30. This isn't the college topic anymore. You don't solve.
You give?
Yep.
Okay. Framework. How exactly do we prove that our scholarship and fiat is desirable? What do you think the AF win condition is?
The AF's win condition. Well, you just reiterated the AF's win condition again. Our argument
Right.
is that
How do we do that?
Right. So if you win, like your presentation within debate was not violent, nor invested in carcerality, you're in a good spot.
How do we assess
Or it
that
outweighs our
scholarship? How do we assess that scholarship is good or bad, absent looking at the consequences of a certain policy surrounding it?
Well, we also agree somewhat consequentialism matters. You like drop the Wang K of consequentialism in the 2AC, so this doesn't really.
This isn't. Actually, would love to talk about Wang. What counter model of ethics do you think Wang presents?
We should unconditionally be opposed to carcerality. We should unconditionally be opposed to carcerality. We are rural utilitarians.
That's actually totally fine. The Wang card, it seems like the impact of that is a consequentialist claim. It says that being consequentialist causes X. I'm confused why this is not just consequentialism.
This is the rural utilitarianism thing I just said above. Like obviously,
okay. Then
we have a
if it's
rule
right,
that we should be unconditionally against carcerality.
Then, as rule util, why is there not a rule against nuclear conflict? Why do we establish this rule, et cetera, et cetera?
Because it matters how we relate to each other in this space. We have made a claim about impact framing that it is very unlikely your movement spill out, change anything. The Rodriguez card's good, but it does matter the intimate violence that is produced in the way that we relate to the criminal justice system.
Okay, then I have one more question about this. Why do we think that anti-carcerality is good?
Why do we think that anti-carcerality is good?
Yeah.
Oh, you got me. Because it is unconditionally bad to cage people.
Why is that true?
Because
we got to go farther. Why is it bad? Why is that true?
The Wang card in the 1 and C indicates it ontologically destroys possibility and.
So that sounds like suffering to me. Like, can we agree on that?
Yes,
sounds.
We agree suffering is bad. This is our argument.
Sweet. Seems like maximization of suffering and
no, it's not maximization of suffering. We've made impact
bad. Actually,
we should operate within debate in a world in which the state is carceral. Like,
that's fine. The terror rep stuff. What evidence do you think would substantiate the act causes external violence anywhere? Harney
says that
why is increased nuclear security domestically tied with increasing expenditures globally?
Well, the AF that's not really what the AF does. The AF has said nuclear terrorists, we need to stop the bombs from getting to the nuclear terrorists. You've read evidence that congressional control of nukes makes them more anti-nuclear terrorists.
I have 30 seconds. I have 30 seconds left. What do you think the alt looks like? What is it like? How does the alt achieve abolition?
The alt looks like the Haitian Revolution. The alternative looks
so the alt causes a revolution against the state.
And then we imagine a world without prisons and cages. Like we've made an imaginative plan of how we should operate.
Sweet. That sounds like fiat. We agree that fiat good.
What? Yes.
We have made a normative statement on future imaginaries. It sounds like fiat.
Yeah, we that was the argument I made right under the alternative that you get to yeah. It's not getting anywhere. Cool. What are we at? Like, oh, thank you, Mike. Sorry about that. 240. Do you have one card to read a card? Okay, cool. I'll do about 235.
When an R is sent, it's just T.
Oh.
Does everyone have the dog? If no one verbally objects, I'm going to assume I'm going to start whenever. Our term is threefold. One, criminal justice is the institutions that are tasked with enforcing criminal law by the system of continental laws to see affirmative changes to reform of police requires mandating change within those who enter criminal the action to the law mandates. No, does the mandates no change to police and that's ISO 3 reform and sentencing requires changing when punishment is imposed after the determination of guilty after just whether you are guilty or not, which is distinct. these arguments are effective because the mandate of the plan is not policing. It is rather that they have to make a new criminal law and people can police that. Otherwise, police have nothing to enforce, which means they don't meet our interpretation. Your evidence that says criminalization. Spirit 10, we read the most of our legal criminal punishment of legal the bottom says international law may be incorporated into domestic law and changed. So we need plaintiffs to act to be public value should be determined by the money seen process explanation of the mandate of the plan is a non-arbitrary standard of the laws which choose their interpretation will given the negative is simple to predictability for capital and disaccomodation that get a strategic advantage of decriminalization then decriminalization there should be reciprocal strategic concept C they that's best for voting issue A plan instead of a second plan for competition is impossible which is split into an argument offense B they are either topical or some of their whole advantages based on changing legal code changing procedure cannot solve there's nothing to police or prosecute in the world of criminal without a criminal code if they go for vacuum they vote a presumption rip they said criminalization and cross-sex is a specific characterization of the absolute criminal penalty that's a criminalization the root of still evidence is wrong and miscut exception to life based on penalties to enforce funding laws not a new thing it's not a funding restriction even if we're wrong they're still applying new criminal penalties to the executive which changes conviction because the executive is convicted for something different which still means they don't meet the bar and does not say the AG is policing which you have to they can alter police and not making a new statute which is wrong because no one can police a law that doesn't exist the counter-interpret we can concede the counter-interpret still will parts here that defense performance sentencing or policing that means even their interpret is amazing it's not fine resolutional phrasing is just a nice FYI not a resolutional a definition the counter-interpret can't solve or often so unpredictable limits or evidence is no intent to be cited and intent to find divine resolutional phrasing the common states the precondition for class their interpret explodes the topic to anything related to criminal justice infinite decrease their permutation by every penalty the law makes it possibly negative two ground a core topic offense is based on changing the function of courts policing such as core called crime the backlash is the reason those arguments are losing is because affirmatives are not forced to feel change or interpret bias for negative generics or brought back in the must deal with the entire process locks and status quo offense negative engage makes the game playable and is always reactionary and always their offense LA massively explains the topic says laws procedure institution and policies during and after the commission of crime the topic includes an infinite amount of apps tangentially related to CGR it includes apps in prison condition health services any instance in an institution related to CGR and every possible law allows them to criminalize anything Title 18 does not define the resolution it says federal criminal law is governed by procedure according to Title 18 that's not resolution or wording neither is substantive criminal justice the same as defining substantial arms sales with 50% making that the topic basis works predictability and is much worse the Del Carmen evidences our argument sentencing does not include conviction which they can't change sentencing occurs after the termination of liability they can sanction no criminal law but not judicial assessment decriminalization changes whether you are liable which is the Snake Sloth and Nielsen Ehlers 5 sentencing that after termination of liability public judicial assessment punishment of reform is electing uniform the nature of a sentence president legislature the defining punishment setting criminal law assessment or sentence a legislature has no preserving the punishment the policing to interpret I don't have to win that their interpret is wrong I'll interpret there's nothing to police their interpret would be massively unlimited because include any of the arbitrarily kind of just maintaining order stopping trash teachers prosecutors debate coaches all maintain order they're different police and it's impossible to find what maintaining order means which means impossible for the judge to decide what after changing criminal law enforcement doesn't alter policing woods 15 states retain legal protection limited the criminal penalty the capital classification believe classification achieved the police authority departments of regulation criminalization modify section of the meaning of limited the precision stuff at the top it is literature consensus this is how sentencing work I don't really have to define the criminal law stuff again because sentencing does not imply conviction maybe they can change criminal law but they cannot convict people for new things under our sentencing interpretations because they still have to answer that's most precise is literature consensus and our evidence defines resolutional wording that was above the reach of stuff it's not arbitrary it's literature consensus we read a great piece of literature that are predictable which indicate that that is the locus for our research the predictability stuff is outweighed by limits the only way we can have good debates in a predictable topics in a world where there is predictable limits there's no functional limit they need to warn why the perception of law good legal debating there's no way to change the way the process of sentencing to policing evidence rules court jurisdiction forfeiture algorithms are alphabet algorithms peninsulas court alphabet and north states native jurisdiction often NTF unless about policy arguments this year the Afghan is inevitable there's an incentive to innovate but the negative is always reactionary our offense outweighs no over limiting and access so many debates in those counterpoints are so bad beat them on theory reasonability the rest of full proofs are not reasonable competing interests is better they need to win their topic superior A prevents a race to the fringes no bright interest must enclose the sum of a reasonable access on a reasonable topic to be constituted to determine what is reasonable if no substance crowded T teaches us legal mechanisms and processes incentivized under their interprets a race to the top reach sacrifice the best model their offense can't they can't win their offense outweighs
Okay, 7:20 starting now.
Stop prep at 2:52. Let me put that in the chat. There'll be a few cards. Austin will send out one on the critique, and I will send out a few on key. They're very short. Do people mind if I send them in the body, or do you need me to put them in a doc?
All right, you go.
What's that, Gabe? I didn't get any of that.
Put them in one doc, like you and Austin, with both of your cards.
I'll send it to Eleanor.
Sure, yeah.
Just be a little easier.
Cool. I still don't have the email. Okay, cool. I'm saving it now. It's saved. Should be sent. Are people good for the order while I?
A few seconds.
Yeah. Ten seconds used. Austin will put the new time in the chat. No change to the order of the cards or anything. Is everyone good for an order? Cool. Case, the order of the 1AC, crisis stability, then Congress, then T, then the K. Does anyone need that again? I know it's a long one. It's because that monster went in C. Okay, can I get some sort of indication that people are good, ready to, oh no, I'm waiting. Oh, you're good, okay. All right, if someone is not ready, they should stop me roundabout now. The apprehensive collapse of nuclear deterrence uses the commitment trap in Asian nuclear umbrella cause drawing in escalation. Yes, the charge Congress are evidence to indicate criminal penalties too. Over the sort of broad reception commitment charge, which we have been with an internal scenario. It uses the ever steering for nuclear war. The Indian scenario, no, and Indian nuclear weapons don't prevent escalation. They cause the PNP-16 evidence also terminal defense of the nuclear escalation and inevitable and opportunity evidence and just we draw a correlative line between Indian and your argument to indicate the structurally inevitable plus and they model the plan ignorance and impact world that kills everyone. That's true. Good, but the accused evidence is just defense. Good for second advantage. The reinforced congressional expertise, institutional knowledge over nuclear policy, solves two impacts. One is nuclear insecurity. That's fever executives are unrevolved. Other parties don't trust exacerbate. This Congress answer their scenario because only about the perception of other actors seeing the executive crisis. Now, second is nuclear transfer. Congress to reinvigorate nuclear reaction and HE the safety answers. The Mueller evidence of the counter terrorist future capabilities. Otherwise, they launch bombs that kill millions, cause retail costs the international order. No double turn on data two boxes, constraining the imperial presence from nuclear. Use any terrorist usage of the imperials because it sets a check on the ability of the executive ability of the guy to do any of those powers. Now, go to T. Top level not going for plan action action. The plan means policing violated kill plan means policing, but violation for policing and sentencing is the same. It applies to both. So when policing is T4 topical, no terminal effects or effects are action T is just from top. It doesn't link to any of their opposites. They prevent the definition of what extra effects T is. Plus, it just gives you extra ground. And nobody knows exactly what it is. When you do that, any predictability offense now impact tackle due to the top and outweighs determined to be ability better whether the topic should be justified or arbitrarily selecting a different topic. And if it will be predictable, nobody would anticipate, which means they cancel their options. Answers limit their predictability. Anything else is advised and goal pushing by arbitrarily eliminating apps they otherwise can't be, which Shakespeare is the only impact solved by the ballot internally turns all their options because evil playing field. Key to advice or research also crucial to the TOC when there's no way they actually test a change on what the topic would look like. Now, criminal justice, structure of laws, and agencies designed to hold criminals accountable for a brand. The literary university using a definition cracked by a plethora of legal scholars has to define and include the acts of precision Oregon. Civil criminal justice includes all activity pertaining to prosecution offenses under criminal law. Argument is better for the negative. Vast majority of small acts held by ESR courts was forced large sweeping changes to press. They allow for advantage government negatives more. Look for specific offensive better links to court juries like politics. There's love for any number of tweaks to criminal procedure which can be solved by ESR courts because they have authority over those areas. Now, policing is the regulation of safety connected to CJR, which includes prevention, detection, investigation, and prosecution of crimes. Policing is only carried out by police. The government tradition to go out US Code 18 law enforcement officer means the policing officer engaged in prevention, detection, investigation, prosecution, events. There evidence applying to policing reform either, so it doesn't matter. Sending violation doesn't matter. They can see the plan says and or if we need policing, we're still the woods. Yes, the is policing. There are evidence from PhD candidate. Policing includes investigation and prosecution, which the app prohibits. We're in you now. All examples of actions prove the functional limits cancel limits exposure under their entry because the executive courts don't have authority over those areas, but their entry blocks the app into self-love down to make tiny changes to the existing legal practice, which is worse for outbound innovation, worse for Negra because it's impossible to generate in-depth evidence. Now, it's certain and access and winning anymore, but it's just election bias. The best courts after reading now negative stability, even if some level of outbound examples of massively new risk, unpredictability, innovation outweighs that. Have trauma changes instead of induced Neverlands in New York, substance crowd and incentivize and innovative operating all, which is magnetic meeting interpretation incentivize teams to go for 1% and better, and with no workplace proof reasonability. Okay. Extinction ways, validity, the existential condition for value makes it a prior question. One is endpoints the only reversible impact. None of their options go here without conscious any violence ever being possibly solved that way. Also, turns out no one can participate if they're dead. Second is agency killing everyone for ethics, sacrificial logic of genocide. That they did that to the all that did that to consequential framing vehicle can never be zero. Framing that way, they're absolute pretext for violence, which makes people ethically disposable. Third is suffering. We act as the greater internal links, but under there, offering which is necessarily a bad next out way. 2 and C1, our politics doesn't equal genocide extension. It's only a question of imagination. Claim 2 and C2, that's just a question of framework. 3, no, code all lives matter argument, just a question of which can prevent the most suffering, which they continue to process. For a rule, so it's definitely bad. And that is why we rule not to prevent nuclear conflict. It's just anthology, which means that accidentally to all of our offenses and how we relate doesn't matter. It's only a question of nuclear conflict being good. Cross-ex proof suffering is bad. We prevent the most suffering through absolutely utility, which is just a cross-ex answer, which just framework. Now, fairness, the only framework, the only way to differentiate whether our scholarship is good is consequences, but extend our interpretation after the way the plan versus the test for competitive counter. Anything else impossible to predict. There have been a number of things. The next stage should come first. Ours is right in the resolution, which is most predictable. Key to education, which comes from well-prepared opponents and in-depth conversation, especially decked in world no carbs with infinite app loss and a hypothetically better theory proved by their competition argument theory to deck the standard in the world of fear, proof should be able to disprove. Yeah, finding the apps an opportunity cost the best truth says other claim difference as the win condition for the apps have nothing wrong with this scholarly, which is impossible threshold. Rule about is determining who did the better remaining theory. So if we don't think the government takes out of their offense, it's just a predictable mechanism. Our net benefit outweighs nuclear policy debates are good. So point 3, Taylor proves the axis better because they're focused on detailed implementation of nuclear policy with connotation. The other side's position that you only talk about wars is non-responsive because those are the type of debate Taylor says are good to questions they base advocates for nuclear supremacy and superior sensitivity given so any of their content means a competitive argument game and nobody changed their mind based on a single round, but intertesting and balance to solve and prevents anti-war activists Rojas evidence to internally turn to the policy disorder or any of the rest of their offenses. When we create more advocates, they don't have a problem with ideals community, they have a problem with the number of people going, which means they are even for anti-war advocates aren't perfect, they're necessarily better than anything you actually find the alternative. Now the alternative of managing abolition in a better world, it definitely doesn't solve any of our offense first, doesn't cancel the result any of the framework, which framework in some ways it literally doesn't matter in the rest of the debate. The links of everyone nuclear war anti-nuclearism, we are anti-nuclearism. That was this one case about the false evidence. Second, no terrorism representation. They haven't proved that terrorism necessarily false. We can't access external or negative representation plus abolition. Number one, come to vote. Number 2, our choosing evidence is from their author, and says the focus on use nukes solves the terminal impact of the first link, which means that the permutation has a net benefit of solving that first link.
235. Can you unmute and say 235?
Yeah, 2:35 starting.
Wait, I want to put it on my timer. 2:35 starting now.
Now.
It was a minute.
I'm just not going to be efficient on case of the new app. Like,
Oh no, Ugh. One second. Can you unmute?
Yeah,
Oh, we're unmuted. Okay, 1 second. Tim, are you back? Tim is back. Cool. The orders T. Yeah, the orders T. I think we're all good. Cool. Topic coherence outweighs everything else. Their vision for the topic deletes the role for the negative. There are infinite criminalization efforts that are not grounded in the resolution and are distinct from every other part of the topic that makes in-depth preparation impossible. It matters in the lens of the TOC. Think about what it looks like if you create the precedent of any criminalization effort. You could criminalize anything the federal government currently does and gain an advantage off it. You could criminalize not having single-payer healthcare. You could criminalize not doing anything which makes this topic literally impossible to be negative. That destroys the possibility for third and fourth level testing, which is the iteration in that epistemic reflexivity, which is the only interactional impact debate. It destroys negative fairness. We both agree debate is a game, which they extended on the other page, which proves it offense outweighs. They've conceded that negative offense outweighs affirmative offense. The affirmative is infinite prep time for class speeches, and the negative is always reactionary to infinite affirmative proliferation. So a high risk of their offense is outweighed by a low risk of our offense. They do not meet our interpretation. The app is not topical in the slightest. There's a reason why your gut feeling when you're open it wasn't topical, and you are right now. The executive cannot be convicted of violating the NFU law because it doesn't fucking exist. They can't be policed for violating a non-existing criminal penalty, and they can't be sentenced because there's nothing to be convicted for. The plan needs to create a new criminal law to determine first use. They literally said in Crossix and their CBER card that they changed criminal liability. One in our sloth is super good on this. Indicates sentencing happens after criminal liability and policing happens before criminal liability. The app changes something in the middle of sentencing and policing that is at least extra topical, which leads to all of our offense. They could fiat an infinite amount of new criminal laws and say they are changing policing. Think of the topic like a sandwich. Criminalization is in the middle between the policing bread and the sentencing bread, and the app affects it. Our interpretation is that policing happens before conviction. Criminal justice excludes criminal law and is the institution surrounding criminal law, and sentencing happens after conviction. They have dropped the chart. It is game over. Our evidence indicates that prosecution is not a part of policing, but rather happens after policing. Even if they win prosecution as part of policing, they've still conceded they lose because you cannot be prosecuted for a crime that doesn't exist yet. They have to create the crime of first use, which they do. They are effects and extra topical, and that is bad. It allows them to fiat unpredictable offense. Yes, we get new ground, but we're not prepared to use that ground because it is not predictable. The predictability debate is game over for them when their evidence is not predictable. They've conceded all of our indicts. The Oregon evidence they read in the 1NR isn't defending criminal justice, it's defining criminal justice system. The LAI evidence has no qualifications, no citations, isn't defining resolutional wording, and their Justia evidence comes from a literal website. The Bernard evidence is defining criminal justice in the context of how it is used in the field, and our evidence cites court cases, which is much better from their evidence. Even if they win, a high risk of their predictability offense are limits. Offense outweighs. They conceded that voting negative in this round solves their predictability offense. It creates a community consensus, and more importantly, the affirmative should be read through topic meeting, which we often say there's no terminal impact to this. That negative engagement doesn't outweigh the Oregon evidence I answered above. It links to all of our limits offense. The ESR and court solve. ESR and courts do not solve the infinite criminalization apps. ESR cannot solve creating a new criminal law, and courts also are not legally allowed to create a new criminal law. There is no way to be negative. All of our functional generics don't apply, and even if we get functional generics, that is bad. It doesn't produce in-depth class third and fourth level testing, which I impacted out on the overview. Their interpretation allows for a lot of big apps, but all of those big apps are not predictable nor limited. Yes, they do big things, but they are not in the criminal justice literature base. The negative is not prepared to debate them, so they're still bad for debate. The next argument, how policing includes the prosecution of crimes. This does not make sense. They can't police anything new without creating a law. They change conviction. That means at the very least they're expertise, because you cannot prosecute someone for something that doesn't exist. They did not extend a warrant for why they met sentencing. And if I win my criminal justice definition, they meet, even if they meet the first half of the resolution, they do not meet policing. The one NC evidence is much more predictable, has intent to define, intent to exclude, and intent to be cited, and says that prosecution happens after policing. The Woods evidence indicates that changing criminal liability is distinct from policing, which proves this interpretation is not grounded in literature consensus about what the resolution means. They conceded that the predictability should be read through literature consensus. We are all counting them 4-1 on this D violation is game over. Executive and courts are impacted out above. Even if there's a functional limit, it is bad in the affirmative. Oh man, I lost my voice again. The affirmative can always fiat out of that functional limit by impacting the deficit, which proves that predictable negative limits matter more than everything else. The next argument about affirmative ground, if conceded our interpretation solves this, the criminal law topic, there's 5 criminal laws. The affirmative multiplies that by 1,000. The healthcare topic was 1/2. All of those, the new half the change, criminal procedures such as defund, policing reform, and sentencing reform. All of those as are topically you could change mandatory. You could change mandatory minimums. 3 or 4 halves is sufficient to solve their offense, and they didn't answer any of the examples. So I don't have to read them. And reasonability is mediocrity. Incentivizes the level of judge intervention unprecedented at any other level of debate. There's some of all reasonable interpretations is an unreasonable interpretation. Is unreasonable. To all of our limits offense. There's no definition of what is reasonable. Their only argument is why half grounds outweighs reasonability. You cannot engage the affirmative under their reasonable topic. All of our offense above proves that it's not predictable. Competing interpretations is best. They can just win that their offense outweighs our offense. Which truth is not a race to the bottom, but a race to finding the best topic.
Okay. Let me see. How much prep? 242. Starting. Okay. Just T. Okay. Is everyone good? Sweet. Two impacts of vast that way. There's one unpredictability interpretations that are rooted in health, and let's attempt to parse out the most reasonable interpretation of what the resolution likely means. Ensures poor debates and induce next arbitrary limit after they haven't researched out of the topic, even when they know they're truly within bounds. That encourages negative reliance on generic sorting topics to the education and inhibiting the research necessary to create genuine clashes, destroys that predictability, acting or doesn't incentivize a research topic shooting gaps. The substance crowd outweighs their offense. The process of writing new apps around the most predictable vision of the topic is one that you should incentivize and initiates a virtuous cycle of innovative argument creation and strategy essential to the advocacy training, info processing, and research skills that makes the education sensational and worthwhile and internally turns all of their offense, choosing to punish after doing team research and opting into the most predictable vision of the topic and actually detrimental instead of structure, which teams in today having little clue of the topic. It's not that a meaningful or accordingly true fairness. Their interpretation creates a topic where the evidence gets to enact low to maintain the territory practice. That makes it being like a field day because they get the ESR counterpoint, the courts counterpoint, states counterpoint, and civil counterpoint, plus a newly relevant politics, which makes it possible to I know the topic seems big, but most apps are inherently against ESR and increased apps are all taken out by civil and not here guarantees that politics is that and things that have counterpoint. Also, but a few apps make sweeping changes to the architecture of criminal justice, and they want to limit those apps. They can be terrible apps on the ESR counterpoint in order to either learn anything about the viable areas of the topic or give us a chance of winning on topic the works for generic negative counterpoints and refer the counter to fairness that weighs everything and solely impacts all by the ballot and internally turns all of their offense against the equal playing field. It's going to incentivize research by incentivizing argumentative innovation. I'll do the approach of now predictability outweighs everything. Only reacts and only reacts to our information is number one from a scholar in the field of criminal justice and a professor at a university, which means at the very least we're equal. But number two on the policing level, we have who are conceded the 1 hour U.S. code evidence is from the U.S. It says from the U.S. code and says that law enforcement includes prosecution, which outweighs everything. Legal precision is the gold standard of predictability because the only way to determine what the topic is instead of what we subjectively think it should be is based on the meaning of the topic of interpretations afforded by legal scholars and the U.S. government and the field. Predictability outweighs debatability. One piece is a descriptive question on normative one, debating about what the topic should be. This is a question of why we're debating a different topic. I know the NFU might not seem topical, but it's not what you feel the topic is, but instead what the topic is. I want the arms topic back too. That's not a reason to throw out the topic we have in favor of the one we want. Don't punish 2A's for being half on a sucky topic. Number two, predictability turns debatability, which is conceded all topic ground at the top of it. Legally precise definition of the topic wording. If you only got subjective understandings of what the topic should be, then I investigate the ESR counterpoint, courts counterpoint, cross counterpoint, etc. Because their combination is solely based off legally precise definitions of it. The interpretations of topic wording. A signal cannot solve for predictability. Number one, it's the aims of the TOC. No one's gonna change what absolutely break because it's already overrun by shitty incentives and certain strategy which means they can't signal to solve it. Any of their offensive, but number two, only the resolution of term determines predictability because it's all based off the literature and not individual rounds which are all super subjective and based on misunderstanding which Tunar said because it determines predictability. The interim property takes in Tracy Falcone and Walton. It says that policing is included with the overall system of public order. It includes law enforcement, which includes prosecution per the 1 hour code evidence. It also takes out extra T because if law enforcement and enforcement of prohibitions is topical, which Falcone says, and that means that the enforcement of new prohibitions is also a topical mandate because it increases the scope of law enforcement. It takes on the extra T argument and which the U.S. code supplements. There's also no actual warrant for effects here or reason why we cause follow-on effects if we win the overall Falcone interpretation. Their evidence, a lot of this stuff relies on their interpretation being better than ours, but we have read evidence saying law enforcement is policing, and I've read a government evidence saying the law enforcement includes prosecution, which takes out the vast majority of the push that they don't actually extend these sentencing or CJR violations. But number one, for criminal justice, it includes changes to law, and number two, for sentencing, the hand says and or we only need one either policing or sentencing on the functional military proper. Number one, the civil counterpoint is also for the vast majority of increased apps and enforces any apps that have a criminalization keyword. Now, number two, ESR enforcement solves this. Also, the only argument they have, even if the USR cannot codify new laws, the ESR can increase and can create enforcement mechanisms for certain things, which means that the app needs a codification keyword, and so forces larger apps. This kind of bolsters the internally turn all their limits arguments. We are much better for limits because we are sweeping changes in existing jurisprudence, i.e., our model forces huge and massive changes to existing legal practice, even if some of them are always subjectively determined to be criminal justice. It's always because they can solve limits. The Sentencing Commission Act and the Westminster Immigration Act, etc., all are also included under their intervention, and it's like politics. It says because of the inherent delay mechanism, which means that they can't fully solve limits, but ours can solve for some limits and create better ground to resolve it. Plus, predictability outweighs.
Great debate. I think.
Good debate.
All right, we're all in. Yeah, round them up.
Gabe is out in the wilderness right now, so it'll be a second.
He's shaving his mustache.
Sweet. All right, looks like we have everyone. I was last, so I'm happy to announce. But all right, great. So I thought that this was just a fantastic debate. Congratulations on everyone for making it to the octafinals. The decision was a 3-0 for the negative from Minneapolis South. I mean, I was happy to announce I by no means have to go first. If one of you all would like to start, it doesn't really matter to me.
Sure. I mean, I can go first. I'm happy to go. I think I was in pretty early. I think that the neg wins a link turn to predictability, and that undercuts the AF's ability to win on the 2AR strategy of a predictability first framing. I determined that the neg has a better model for the topic that preserves a limited role for the neg and is actually more predictable than the AF vision, primarily because the only the neg has a clear idea for what the term criminal justice should mean by the end of the round. It's pretty clear that I'm determining best models of the topic. The word reasonable is mentioned in the 2AR, but the 2AR doesn't really go for it. Like I mentioned, the AF relies heavily on going for predictability and using that to turn and outweigh the neg offense, which I think structurally is a good strategy, but the issue is the link level. You're not winning that the AF has a more predictable vision of the topic, and specifically the term criminal justice in the topic. I conclude with the AF that that predictability should control, I think, about debatability, clash, and all the other issues in the debate, but that the neg interp is more predictable. Your 2AR is decent on comparing the policing interps, but you need to clear two thresholds. It's got to be criminal justice, and then it has to be policing or sentencing. And you do relatively well in the latter, but almost entirely ignore the former. If you don't have a vision for what criminal justice means, that creates a problem. You need to, counter define and rigorously defend a competing vision of all the phrases that the neg is going for. Otherwise, it becomes very easy for them to win a large risk of their offense. This is particularly a problem because the neg limits claim is centered primarily on this term criminal justice. They say that if an AF can create new criminal law for anything, it can criminalize any number of things like not having X or Y policy, and as proven by this AF in this debate. The neg also has an affirmative defense of the predictability of their definition. The 2NR specifically calls out the Bernard card and says it defines the term criminal justice, which is the resolutional word, as opposed to criminal justice system. And so given all of that, the 2AR saying policing includes law enforcement is not super relevant when the meaning of the term criminal justice limits out merely changing criminal law that affects policing. On the AF's defense, I think it's solid, but with a large risk of a predictable limits problem, it's insufficient. Some of the 2AR analysis here was new, particularly on emphasizing civil a lot and applying to criminalization apps. But regardless, I think it established that neg would have a shot of a generic counterplan in a lot of debates, not that it significantly reduced the need for me to care about the most predictable definition of the round. Same thing goes for, we create better neg ground because of bigger apps. Predictability undercuts your own impact. Just because the neg would have ground against certain of these larger apps under interp doesn't mean that it was predictable ground. So I think the link level problems on predictability spill over to other parts of the debate. Same stuff about their vision of the topic being big. It's defense, the education stuff, but doesn't mitigate the predictability DA. Given all this, I think, just given the 2AR framing, ongoing for predictability and trying to turn the neg offense and outweigh it with that, once I determine that the neg interpretation and vision is more predictable, it's pretty easy for me to vote neg.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm along the same lines. The line by line that he just gave you was pretty spot on. I thought the best framing in this debate was done like Gabe's sort of swan song of the 2NR was saying, the purpose of reasonability and topicality is to determine the best topic. And that's just that's just honestly to God true. And it's the way in which it's sort of structured the whole rest of the debate. that whether or not aft innovation is a thing, because like there was some pushback on aft innovation, and I'm all for aft innovation, but like when it pushes the limits of what the topic is and what it should be, there's just a gut check level of like, I think this is a bridge too far. Like, I think the innovation probably should have been answered by the negative by saying, how innovative is it when you're recycling an aft from the college topic 2 years ago? But that arg was never made. Ultimately, I just felt that the 2AR was way too defensive on too many claims. Like, to trying to access predictability offense was your only offense. And when you're really having no answer to the question of what, like, the distinction between substance and procedure, that substantive law absolutely proliferates this topic to a point of hundreds and hundreds of thousands. Actually, I think we had a card that said 4,400 possible affirmatives. To the point where like there's just no way you can access predictability. So I agree that like there's just no way you could win any sort of link turn there, and that the offense for the negative was just clearly too good and too beatable. The magnitude just overwhelming. Whether or not they're like you extended the U.S. Not Oregon, U.S. something card in the 1AR, I don't think that card gets you what you want. I think that the 2NR was pretty good, making a defensive claim that like you kind of selectively highlighted that to say what you wanted it to say, but in the end, it really didn't get you any sort of counter interpretation that in any way dodged the offense of the topicality violation. There was really no we meet argument as of the 2AR. And, the question of functional limits, I mean, Gabe's just right. Like, from a truth level, he's right. Like, the courts can't create new law like that. The executive can't create new law like that. And in the case of criminalization, as opposed to decriminalization, it's criminalization, ESR just doesn't, it's not a thing. So there is just too much of a level of predictability. I mean, I'll rant and rave a little bit by saying that I think this should have been more of an issue that the camps brought out. I thought this was a bigger problem after the first couple tournaments of the year, that these criminalization, decriminalization affirmatives were going to become too pervasive. And I think I even actually predicted too many decriminalization, criminalization affirmatives at the TOC as being like this sort of world of dystopian nightmare that I did not want to judge. And ultimately I was correct in that assessment, not that it became a dystopian nightmare, but people would try and press the limits of what this was. So from a purely this is the way I think the topic should and shouldn't be standpoint, I'm clearly on the side of the negative here. There's just sort of rhetorically, they were singing to me from the very beginning of the debate. So yes, I don't think you're predictable. And I think that the impact of that is bad debates, and I don't want those.
Yeah, for me, I started with it was just easier to understand the connections to the negatives core offense. I agree, this seeding the criminalization sort of debate, I kind of understand what you're trying to do in the 2AR, where you're well, if we are policing just includes that, then this criminalization debate is obviated, was sort of what I understood the thrust of what you're trying to say, because you're it's not sandwiched, it's just the thing. But that still kind of begs the question of their offense. They've kind of made the claim that a super unlimited topic is really bad for the neg. The most important kinds of education we get is second and third level testing. That's better when there's less AFs. And so all those kind of normative questions that they have said I should compare to predictability were relevant for me. And that's something that people haven't spoken to as much. I definitely agree that more explanation about the predictability, why your evidence is the most predictable, I get that government definitions maybe can trump things, but I did think that the way that this evidence is highlighted and the words that it uses are so vague that I could just see affirmatives abusing it in the way that they described. Being able to say dealing with the enforcement of statutory prohibitions is an activity of law enforcement. And then that means that basically any prosecution, investigation, it's just very broad under that interpretation. And so I agreed with some of their normative arguments there. One thing that was hard for me, or would have been helpful from both sides, is there was I thought there was some under debating about the case, what the case lists in a world of policing were, how well they could be debated. There was a lot of generic claims about the power of the ESR and the court's counterplan under each one and sort of functional limits, but it would have helped me more to be okay, what are the policing AFs that really exist? The Minneapolis has kind of said there's 3 or 4, like how debatable are those? Can this, like a discussion about the role of the state's counterplan in some of those was something that would have helped me to be like, is this viable? Like, I thought there could have been other ways that those were debated that would have, I wish there was a little more emphasis on as well. So that was like a place where it was like, I thought that it was kind of late breaking and the 2NR and 2AR starting to make some of those assertions and kind of asked me to, you know, think about my topic experience a little bit as I was thinking about this. And I did think that, you know, the other place that the 2NR got, besides everything that the judges said, is I thought that the 2NR had a few pretty good, like, even if places, like, even if I agreed that, you know, you were predictable, I should still decide limits was more important, and then had a set of arguments for that. But like, you know, the app starts to get at an answer and is in the defense of predictability, but it was just like hard for me to kind of trace sort of like how all those things line together as well. So I agree, you know, with a large thrust of what people have said. I just wanted to add how I kind of went through it and read the evidence and sort of developed my understanding. I thought this was an excellent debate and I thought it was a privilege to judge it. So congratulations to everyone here.
Yeah, Austin and Eleanor, it's been a long ride since round 5 of Emory, I think, in 2019. Glad to see your careers, you know, turn out the way it did, ending, you know, so strong. And I'm sad that I had to be the one here to do it, but privileged that you would let me be one of the people that would let me be here in the Octas. So good luck to you both.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brian.
It was amazing to debate y'all, Caddo.
Hell yeah,
Good
Gabe.
luck in your
Record,
record. We have more new apps to send you. They'll be in your email shortly.
It's all in a few.
I would like to see a record breakdown of like whether or not you won more at Eleanor's house or at Austin's house. Like, I think that's a dissertation to be written.
I like the light. I think the light is good for us.
We're gonna head out. Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Great debate.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Just